energy. She stops being a diluted version of herself and becomes a concentrated one. She stops performing and starts being. The journey ahead is about reclaiming every piece of yourself that you've ever traded away for the sake of peace. It's about taking those dark emotions, the rage, the envy, the hunger, and turning them into the fuel that powers your life. You are standing at the edge of the garden. The gates are open. The Red Sea is calling. It is time to stop being the girl who waits and start being the woman who walks. The moon is rising, and it is a deep, powerful crimson. It is time to wake up. Chapter 2: Why do we fear the dark? In the spring of 1692, the village of Salem, Massachusetts, looked like the picture of perfect peace. The houses were neat, the church bells rang on time, and every person knew their place. Families sat down to dinner in quiet rooms, and children were taught that silence was the greatest gift they could give to God. To any traveler passing through, it was a town of high morals and steady hands. But inside those quiet rooms, the air was thick with a heavy, unspoken terror. Neighbors watched each other through the cracks in their shutters. Parents worried that a single wrong word from their daughter could bring the whole house down. The peace was a mask, and underneath it, a fire of repressed rage and fear was waiting for a single spark to turn the town into a graveyard. That spark didn't come from a war or a famine. It came from a group of young girls who started to scream. They barked like dogs, threw themselves into fires, and twisted their bodies into shapes that didn't seem human. The town doctors couldn't find a cure, so they turned to the only answer they had left: witchcraft. They needed someone to blame for the darkness that had broken their perfect peace. They chose a woman named Tituba. She was an enslaved woman from the Caribbean, a person with no social standing, no money, and no voice in the community. In the eyes of the village leaders, she was the perfect target. She was the other. She was the dark thing they had always feared. The plan was simple. They would beat her until she confessed, and then they would hang her to show everyone that the light had won. But Tituba did something that no one expected. She didn't just sit there and take the punishment. She didn't beg for mercy or try to prove she was a good, quiet woman like the others. Instead, she leaned into the very darkness they were so afraid of. When she was brought before the court, she didn't just admit to being a witch. She told them stories that made their blood run cold. She spoke of a tall man from Boston who made her sign a book in blood. She described yellow birds that sucked on fingers and black cats that spoke in human voices. By claiming the darkness as her own, Tituba did something incredible. She became the most important person in the room. The judges, who usually looked at her with disgust, now looked at her with wide-eyed wonder and fear. She became the expert on the shadow world they didn't understand. Because she held the secrets of the dark, they couldn't kill her yet. They needed her. While the good girls of the village were eventually sent to the gallows for trying to prove their innocence, Tituba survived. She used the town's own fear of the dark as a shield. She realized that when you stop trying to be nice and light, you gain a power that the world cannot easily take away. The invisible wall of niceness. We often think of the Salem witch trials as a crazy moment in history that could never happen today. We tell ourselves we are more advanced. We don't hunt women for talking to cats or dancing in the woods. But the fear that drove those people in 1692 is still living inside most women today. It has just changed its shape. Instead of a literal gallows, we have the wall of niceness. This is an invisible set of rules that tells us how to act if we want to be safe, loved, and successful. The wall of niceness is built out of small, daily habits. It's the way you smile when a stranger says something rude to you just to keep the peace. It's the way you say, "I'm sorry," before asking a question in a meeting. It's the way you hide your ambition because you don't want people to think you are power-hungry or difficult. This wall feels like it's protecting us, but it's actually a cage. It keeps our true power, our dark feminine energy, locked away in the basement of our minds. We fear the dark because we have been told for centuries that a woman with dark traits is a monster. If she is angry, she is hysterical. If she is focused on her own goals, she is selfish. If she is sexually confident, she is a mess. We spend our whole lives trying to stay in the light, trying to be the good girl who everyone likes. But the good girl is exhausted. She is burnt out, she is often overlooked, and she is constantly waiting for someone else to give her permission to lead her own life. The truth is that the parts of yourself you have been taught to fear, your rage, your deep hunger for more, your sharp intuition, are the exact tools you need to build a life of true authority. When we look at Tituba, we don't see a villain. We see a woman who was pushed into a corner and found her power in the one place no one else dared to look, the shadow. The 3 bricks of the witch wound. To understand why we stay behind the wall of niceness, we have to look at what experts call the witch wound. This isn't a physical injury. It's a deep, collective memory passed down through generations of women. It's the feeling that if you stand out too much, or if you are too much of anything, you will be punished. This wound is made of 3 specific fears that keep us small. The fear of visibility. This is the feeling that being seen is dangerous. In Salem, if you were the most beautiful woman, the smartest woman, or the woman who owned the most land, you were the first one accused of witchcraft. Today, this shows up as a fear of bragging or taking up space. You might find yourself dressing in a way that helps you blend in, or staying quiet about your wins because you don't want to make others feel bad. You are trying to stay invisible so the hunters won't notice you. The fear of intensity. We are taught that feminine means soft, quiet, and easy to handle. When a woman shows intensity, whether it's intense anger at an injustice or an intense desire for a high-paying job, it makes people uncomfortable. We have learned to turn down the volume on our own souls. We worry that if we show our true fire, we will be seen as crazy or too intense for a partner or a boss to handle. The fear of abandonment. This is the most painful brick in the wall. Historically, a woman who was kicked out of her community was as good as dead. She couldn't survive alone. This fear lives in our DNA. We worry that if we stop being the supportive, nice friend and start setting hard boundaries, everyone will leave us. We trade our power for the safety of being liked, even if the people who like us don't actually respect us. Alina's invisible meeting. In a high-rise office building in Seattle, Elena Vance sat in a conference room that felt like a glass box. Outside, the gray rain blurred the city, but inside the lights were bright and the air was cold. Elena was the senior marketing manager, and she had spent 3 weeks working on a plan to save a failing tech launch. She had stayed up until 2 a.m. for 5 nights in a row. She had the data, she had the vision, and she knew exactly what the company needed to do. But as the meeting started, Elena felt the wall of niceness closing in. She sat at the edge of the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When her boss asked for ideas, she waited for a polite pause. She didn't want to interrupt. She didn't want to seem like she was trying to show off. She kept her voice low and started her sentences with, "I was just thinking maybe." Before she could finish her thought, a man named Mark leaned over the table. He didn't wait for a pause. He didn't use soft words. He took the core of Alina's idea, stripped away the maybes, and presented it as his own. "Here's what we're going to do," he said, slamming a hand on the table for emphasis. The room went silent for a second, and then everyone started nodding. Her boss smiled and told Mark it was a brilliant, aggressive strategy. Elena felt a hot sting in her chest. It was a mix of shame and a very dark, very cold anger. She looked at her reflection in the glass wall of the office. She saw a woman who looked professional, put together, and perfectly nice. But she also saw a woman who was becoming a ghost. By trying to be the good employee who didn't make waves, she had made herself invisible. She realized that her fear of being the difficult woman was costing her more than her career. It was costing her her soul. She was living in her own version of 1692, letting the marks of the world take the credit while she hid in the shadows of her own politeness. The mirror of the villain. Why do we let this happen? Part of the reason is that we are constantly shown that the dark feminine woman is the villain. Think about the movies you watched as a kid. The princess was always light. She was kind to animals, she was patient, and she waited to be saved. The villain, however, was always a dark feminine archetype. She was the one with the power, the ambition, and the loud voice. She was Maleficent, she was Ursula, she was the wicked queen. In modern movies, this hasn't changed much. We see women like Miranda Priestly in The Devil Wears Prada. She is incredibly good at her job, she is powerful, and she doesn't care if people like her. But the movie frames her as a devil. We are taught to fear her, not to be like her. This creates a mental trap. We think, I want to be successful, but I don't want to be a Miranda. I don't want to be a bitch. This is what researchers call the male gaze. It's the idea that women are taught to view themselves through the eyes of a man, or society. We don't ask, how do I feel? Instead, we ask, how do I look to them? We become the directors of our own lives, but we are filming the movie for an audience that wants us to stay in a very small, very nice role. When we start to step into our dark energy, we feel like we are breaking the rules of the movie. We feel like we are becoming the villain of our own story. But here is the secret. The villain is usually the only one in the story who actually has any autonomy. She is the only one who isn't waiting for a prince. She is the only one who knows what she wants and goes after it. What if the traits we call villainous in women are actually just the traits of a leader? What if the darkness isn't evil, but just a type of strength that doesn't ask for permission? The obsidian mirror. There is a concept in ancient traditions called the obsidian mirror. Obsidian is a black volcanic glass. It is dark, smooth, and deep. In the past, people used it to look into their own shadows. Unlike a regular mirror that shows you your perfect surface, the obsidian mirror is meant to show you what is hidden beneath. In this journey, the obsidian mirror is your first tool. It's the practice of looking at the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable. Imagine you are holding this mirror right now. In it, you don't see the nice girl who smiles at the office. You see the woman who is furious. You see the woman who wants to be the boss. You see the woman who is tired of being approachable. Most of us spend our lives trying to crack this mirror. We don't want to see the witch inside. We want to believe we are only made of light and kindness. But when you reject your shadow, you reject your fuel. Anger is just energy that tells you a boundary has been crossed. Envy is just energy that tells you what you truly desire. Ambition is just energy that tells you that you are capable of more. When Elena looked into the glass wall of her office, she was looking into an obsidian mirror. At first, she felt ashamed of her anger. She thought she should be happier for Mark or more patient with her boss. But then she stopped trying to be good. She looked at the angry woman in the reflection and realized that woman was the only one who could save her. The nice Elena was the one who had been passed over. The dark Elena was the one who was ready to fight. The reframe, darkness as depth. We have to stop thinking of darkness as something that means bad or harmful. In nature, the dark is where the most important work happens. A seed cannot grow in the bright burning sun. It needs the cold dark earth to break open and find its roots. A child grows in the dark of the womb. Our bodies heal in the dark of sleep. The dark feminine is not about being evil to others. It is about being fiercely loyal to yourself. It is the part of you that says, I will not let my light be dimmed just so you can feel more comfortable. It is the part of you that understands that you cannot be a queen if you are always acting like a servant. The people in Salem feared the dark because they couldn't control it. They couldn't predict what Tituba would say next. They couldn't explain the wildness of the forest. Society fears your dark feminine energy for the same reason, because a woman who owns her shadow cannot be manipulated. She cannot be shamed into silence. She cannot be managed by people who don't have her best interests at heart. If you feel a sense of fear as you start this work, that is a good sign. It means you are approaching the wall. It means you are getting close to the witch wound that has kept you small for years. But remember Tituba. She was in the most dangerous position a person could be in. She was surrounded by people who wanted her dead. And she survived not by being purer than them, but by being darker. She showed them that she was not a victim, but a force of nature. You are not a nice girl who is trying to learn how to be mean. You are a powerful, complex being who has been living in a tiny corner of your own soul. The darkness is not a hole you fall into. It is a basement where all your best weapons are stored. It is time to go downstairs, turn on the light, and see what you have at your disposal. The goal of this chapter is to help you realize that your fear of the dark is not your own. It was given to you by a world that wants you to stay easy to handle. When you stop fearing your own intensity, you stop being a target for the world's projections. You become the one holding the mirror. And when you look into that mirror, you will see that the witch they told you to fear is actually the woman who is going to set you free. The darkness isn't the end of the world. It's the beginning of your real life. It's the place where you stop asking, "Am I good enough?" and start asking, "Are they worthy of me?" It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. It takes you from the village square of Salem, where everyone is watching and judging, to the deep wild forest where you finally have the room to breathe. The forest is dark, yes. But in the dark, you can finally see the stars. Chapter 3: Shadow Work, Mining Gold from the Abyss. From high above the dusty streets of 1612 Rome, the city looks like a complicated puzzle of stone and shadow. You can see the grand churches, the busy markets, and the dark alleys where secrets are kept. Most women in this world move like ghosts. They walk with their heads down, their voices quiet, and their dreams hidden behind heavy wooden doors. They are taught that being good means being invisible. They are told that their only power lies in their silence and their ability to follow the rules made by men. In one of those stone buildings, a young woman named Artemisia Gentileschi is breaking the pattern. She is not a ghost. She is an artist, and she is about to face a nightmare that would destroy most people. While the rest of Rome expects her to disappear into her shame, she is preparing to do something much more dangerous. She is about to go into the darkest parts of her own story and find the power hidden there. Artemisia was a teenager with a gift for painting that rivaled the masters. But her world was shattered when her teacher, a man named Agostino Tassi, betrayed her trust and hurt her deeply. In those days, a woman who had been harmed was seen as broken. The rules of society said she should hide, feel ashamed, and never speak of it. But Artemisia refused to play the part of the victim. She did the unthinkable. She took him to court. The trial lasted 7 months. It was not a search for truth, it was a battle of wills. To verify her story, the judges used a horrific device called the Sibyl. These were cords wrapped around her fingers and pulled tight by a screw, designed to crush her bones. They wanted to see if she would change her story under the pressure of physical agony. As the cords dug into her skin, the very hands she used to create her art, Artemisia looked her accusers in the eye. She did not scream for mercy. She did not take back her words. She leaned into the darkness of the moment and owned her truth so completely that the court could not break her. This was Artemisia's first step into shadow work. She didn't try to pretend the pain wasn't there. She didn't try to stay a nice girl who forgave and forgot. Instead, she took the rage, the betrayal, and the grit she found in that courtroom and turned it into the fuel for her career. She realized that the parts of her that society called ugly or damaged were actually the strongest parts of her soul. The basement of the mind. The shadow is not a collection of bad things. It is simply the basement of your mind, where you have tossed everything you were told was too much. When you were a little girl, maybe you were told that being angry was unladylike. So you took your anger and threw it in the basement. Maybe you were told that being proud of your beauty or your brains was conceited. So you took your confidence and threw it in the basement too. Shadow work is the process of going down into that dark room with a flashlight. It is about realizing that your anger is actually your sense of justice. Your conceit is actually your self-worth. Your intensity is actually your passion. When we hide these parts of ourselves, we become diluted versions of who we are meant to be. We become like a light bulb with a thick cloth thrown over it. We are still there, but we aren't shining. In Seattle, Elena Vance was living under a very thick cloth. She sat in her minimalist apartment, surrounded by soft gray furniture and live, laugh, love style art that she didn't even like. She had spent 10 years being the perfect employee at her tech firm. She never complained when people took her lunch from the office fridge. She never pushed back when her boss gave her extra work on a Friday afternoon. She was the nice girl of the marketing department. But lately, Elena felt like she was disappearing. She would catch her reflection in the glass walls of the office and see a woman who looked tired, small, and gray. She felt a constant, quiet hum of resentment in her chest. It felt like a heavy stone sitting on her heart. She was terrified of that feeling. She thought that if she ever let that resentment out, it would turn into a monster that would ruin her life. One night, after a particularly bad day where a coworker took credit for her data, Elena went into her bathroom and locked the door. She looked into the mirror. She didn't look at her hair or her skin. She looked deep into her own eyes, trying to see the person she used to be back in college, the girl who wanted to change the world. She saw the obsidian mirror for the first time. This is the moment where you stop looking at the person you pretend to be and start looking at the person you actually are. She felt a wave of hot, bubbling anger. Instead of pushing it down like she usually did, she decided to try something new. She grabbed a pillow from her bed, held it tight against her face, and let out a scream. It wasn't a small, polite sound. It was a deep, guttural roar that came from the very bottom of her stomach. When she finally stopped, her face was flushed and her heart was racing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. The monster she was so afraid of wasn't a monster at all. It was her own power begging to be let out. The Shadow Toolkit. Reclaiming your power requires more than just one scream into a pillow. It requires a set of tools to help you navigate the basement of your mind without getting lost. These methods help you find the gold hidden in the dark. 1. The mirror gaze, the obsidian mirror. This is the practice of looking at yourself without a mask. Find a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. Stand in front of a mirror and set a timer for 5 minutes. Look directly into your own eyes. Do not judge your appearance. Instead, ask yourself, what am I hiding from myself today? Wait for the answer. You might feel a sudden urge to cry, or you might feel a flash of irritation. Do not turn away. The goal is to witness your own intensity. When you can look at your own dark emotions without flinching, other people's opinions will lose their power over you. You are becoming your own witness. 2. Identifying the golden shadow. Sometimes the things we hide in the shadow aren't negative traits. We also hide our greatness because we are afraid of the responsibility that comes with it. This is called the golden shadow. To find yours, look at the women you admire most. What is it about them that makes you feel a little bit jealous? If you are jealous of a woman's confidence, that confidence is sitting in your own shadow. If you are jealous of a woman's wealth, the ability to create abundance is in your shadow. If you are jealous of a woman's freedom, your own wildness is waiting for you in the basement. We only feel jealousy toward things we are capable of achieving ourselves. Use your envy as a map. It is telling you exactly what you have suppressed. 3. The shadow dialogue. Give your shadow a voice. Sit down with a notebook and think of a trait you usually try to hide, like selfishness. On one side of the page, write as your good girl self. Ask, why are you here? You're making me look bad. On the other side of the page, let the shadow answer. It might say, I'm here because you never say no. I'm trying to protect your time. I'm trying to keep you from burning out. When you listen to the shadow, you realize it's usually trying to help you. Once you understand its goal, you can use that energy more wisely. Instead of being selfish, you can start being sovereign. 4. Productive narcissism. Society tells women that putting themselves first is a sin. But to have dark feminine power, you must practice a bit of productive narcissism. This isn't about hurting others, it's about being obsessed with your own growth. Start by spending 10 minutes every day doing something purely for your own pleasure or progress, and tell no one about it. Do not post it on social media. Do not tell your partner. Keep that energy for yourself. This builds a secret garden of power that no one else can touch. It teaches your brain that your value doesn't come from how much you do for others. Mining gold from the abyss. The reason we do this work is not just to feel better. It is to become more effective in the world. When you integrate your shadow, you become heavy in a good way. People can feel your presence when you walk into a room because you aren't hiding half of yourself anymore. You are whole. Artemisia Gentileschi's story didn't end in that courtroom. She took the pain of the trial and the shadow of her reputation and did something revolutionary. She painted a picture of Judith slaying Holofernes. In the painting, a woman is reclaiming her power by defeating a man who tried to dominate her. But Artemisia did something special. She painted her own face onto the woman and the face of her attacker onto the man. She took her dark desire for justice and turned it into a masterpiece. She didn't stay a victim. She became a legend. Because she was willing to work with her shadow, she became the first woman ever admitted to the Accademia di Arte del Disegno in Florence. She went from being a girl whose hands were almost crushed to a woman who dominated the art world of Europe. She proved that an untamed woman who owns her shadow can thrive even in a world built to keep her down. Back in Seattle, Elena started small. The next time her coworker tried to take credit for her work in a meeting, Elena didn't stay quiet. She didn't get mean or aggressive either. She simply leaned back in her chair, held the coworker's gaze for a second too long and said, "I'm so glad you like the data I put together for that. I actually have the rest of the strategy ready to present now." She felt the old fear of being difficult rise up in her throat. But she also felt that roar from her bathroom ritual. She realized she wasn't being difficult, she was being honest. The room went quiet. Her boss looked at her with a new kind of respect. By owning her selfish desire to be recognized, she actually helped the team by showing who was really doing the work. When you stop fearing your own darkness, you stop fearing the world. The shadow is only scary when it is behind you, chasing you. When you turn around and face it, it becomes your shadow, a tool that follows you, protects you, and gives you depth. The alchemy of integration. The goal of shadow work is alchemy. In the old days, alchemists tried to turn lead into gold. In your life, you are turning the leaden weight of your repressed emotions into the gold of your personal power. You do this by realizing that there is no such thing as a bad emotion. There are only misplaced energies. Rage, when used correctly, becomes the courage to set a boundary. Envy, when used correctly, becomes the inspiration to grow. Fear, when used correctly, becomes the intuition that keeps you safe. When you look into the obsidian mirror, you might see things that make you uncomfortable. You might see a woman who is tired of being nice. You might see a woman who wants more money, more sex, more power, or more respect. The good girl version of you will want to apologize for these desires. She will want to push them back into the basement. Do not let her. Instead, ask those desires to sit down at the table with you. Ask them what they need. When you stop fighting yourself, you stop leaking energy. Most people are exhausted because they are spending 50% of their brain power trying to keep their shadow in the basement. Imagine what you could do if you had all that energy back. You could build businesses. You could command rooms. You could walk through the world with the calm, magnetic presence of a woman who has nothing to hide. Elena Vance began to change her wardrobe. She got rid of the soft grays and started wearing deeper colors, forest greens, burgundies, and blacks. She didn't do it to be edgy. She did it because she felt like she finally matched her internal world. She stopped putting live, laugh, love signs on her walls and started buying art that had teeth. She noticed that her nice girl friends started to drift away, but they were replaced by people who were more ambitious, more honest, and more interesting. She realized that by hiding her shadow, she had been attracting people who only liked the mask. Now that she was showing her true self, she was attracting people who respected her power. Returning to the light. Artemisia Gentileschi lived a long, successful life. She traveled to London to paint for kings. She managed her own money, which was almost unheard of for a woman at the time. She never apologized for her past. She used it as her signature. When people looked at her paintings, they didn't see a broken woman. They saw a woman who knew the darkness and wasn't afraid of it. That is the gift of the shadow. It gives you a type of beauty that isn't fragile. It is the beauty of a diamond that has been formed under immense pressure. It is the beauty of a forest at night, mysterious, deep, and full of life. The next time you feel a dark emotion rising up, don't reach for a distraction. Don't scroll through your phone or try to talk yourself out of it. Instead, remember the obsidian mirror. Go into that dark room in your mind and see what your shadow is trying to give you. You are not a ghost in your own life. You are the architect of it. And every architect knows that you cannot build a skyscraper without digging deep into the ground first. Your shadow is your foundation. It is the part of you that is unbreakable because it has already seen the worst and survived. When Elena Vance finally walked out of that tech firm to start her own consulting business, she didn't look back. She didn't feel the need to explain herself or ask for permission. She just walked out of the glass doors and into the Seattle rain, feeling the weight of her own soul for the first time. She wasn't just a marketing manager anymore. She was a woman who had found the gold in her own abyss, and she was ready to spend it. The darkness isn't there to swallow you. It's there to sharpen you. Own your rage, own your hunger, and own your truth. When you do, you stop being a person who reacts to the world and start being a person the world reacts to. That is the beginning of your power. That is the heart of the dark feminine. Chapter 4: Mastering the Art of the Boundary. When I was 22, I worked as an assistant for a woman named Anya. She was a retired ballroom dancer from Eastern Europe who had moved to the city to open a small, exclusive studio. Anya was 80 years old, smelled like cloves and old books, and moved with a grace that made the rest of us look like we were stumbling through deep mud. She didn't just teach people how to waltz, she taught them how to hold their space. One Tuesday afternoon, I was frazzled. I was juggling 3 phone calls, trying to fix a broken espresso machine, and apologizing to a grumpy student who had arrived 10 minutes early. I was yes-ing everyone, nodding my head until my neck ached, and trying to be as helpful as possible. Anya watched me from the corner of the room, her back perfectly straight. She didn't say a word until the studio was empty. She called me over and told me to stand in the center of the dance floor. She took a piece of white tailor's chalk from her pocket and drew a circle around me, about 3 feet in diameter. Then she told me to stay inside it. She began to walk around the circle, occasionally poking her finger toward my chest or stepping right up to the line. Every time she did, I flinched or leaned back, trying to be polite and give her more room. Anya stopped. She looked me in the eyes and told me that my frame was made of wet paper. She explained that in dance, if your frame is weak, your partner will crush you. If your frame is too stiff and angry, no one will want to dance with you. But if your frame is made of silk over steel, you become the one who leads, even if you aren't the one taking the first step. She told me that I was leaking my power because I was afraid to let the circle be solid. I was letting everyone's needs, moods, and demands crawl inside that chalk line. That was the day I learned that a boundary isn't a wall meant to keep people out. It's a container meant to keep your soul in. The Queen Who Married a Kingdom. In the winter of 1558, a 25-year-old woman with fire-red hair and a sharp, calculating gaze stood before a group of powerful men who were certain she would fail. Elizabeth I had just inherited the throne of England. The country was a mess. It was broke, divided by religion, and surrounded by enemies who wanted to swallow it whole. To the men in her parliament, the solution was simple. Elizabeth needed to get married. In their minds, a woman was a vessel that needed a lid. They believed she was too emotional, too weak, and too feminine to rule without a king to guide her. They didn't just suggest marriage, they demanded it. They brought her petitions. They cornered her in hallways. They used every trick in the book to pressure her into giving up her sovereignty to a husband. Elizabeth understood something that most people miss. She knew that if she said no with anger or screamed at them to leave her alone, she would be labeled hysterical and likely replaced. If she simply stayed quiet, they would choose a husband for her. She needed a different kind of weapon. She needed a way to say no that felt like an invitation to respect her, rather than a declaration of war. She walked into the great Parliament chamber, dressed in gold and white, looking every bit the light feminine queen they expected. But underneath the silk was the steel Anya had talked about. She thanked the men for their loving care for her safety. She smiled. She used soft words. And then she held up her hand to show them a gold ring. She told them she had already been joined in marriage to the Kingdom of England. She told them that for her, this was enough. She said that when she died, she wanted her marble tomb to say that a queen, having lived and reigned such a time, lived and died a virgin. It was a masterpiece of the velvet number. She didn't fight them. She simply occupied her space so fully that there was no room for a king to stand beside her. She turned her weakness, her status as a single woman, into her greatest strength. By setting that unbreakable boundary, she ruled for 44 years and turned England into a global power. She didn't ask for permission to be the boss. She simply was. The brittle no versus the velvet number. Most of us struggle with boundaries because we think there are only two ways to set them. We either act like a doormat or we act like a bulldozer. The doormat approach is what I was doing in Anya's studio. It's the good girl conditioning we talked about earlier. You say yes when you want to say no. You explain yourself until you're blue in the face, hoping the other person will understand and let you have a boundary. You apologize for having needs. This is a massive energy leak. Every time you apologize for your boundaries, you are telling the world that your time and space aren't actually yours, they are up for negotiation. On the other side is the bulldozer, or the brittle number. This happens when we've been a doormat for too long, and we finally snap. We set the boundary with a scream. We are defensive, angry, and cold. While this is better than having no boundaries at all, it actually costs you magnetic power. When you are angry, you are reacting to the other person. They are still the one in control of your emotions. The dark feminine operates in the middle. This is the velvet number. It is a boundary that is soft in its delivery, but unbreakable in its substance. It doesn't require a raised voice. It doesn't require an explanation. It is the energy of a woman who knows her worth so deeply that she doesn't feel the need to defend it. Think of a high-end jewelry store. When you walk in, the diamonds are behind thick glass. The salesperson doesn't scream at you to stay back. They are incredibly polite. They might even offer you a glass of water. But if you try to reach over the counter and grab a necklace, you will find that the glass doesn't move. The softness of the store, the carpet, the music, the polite staff, doesn't change the fact that the boundary is absolute. That is the energy you want to cultivate. Elena's kitchen incident. Elena Vance stood in the office kitchen, watching the coffee drip into her mug. Her heart was thumping against her ribs. Usually, this was the time of day she felt the most drained. She had already spent 3 hours fixing mistakes on a report that wasn't even hers. Her boss Dave walked in. He was a man who used his height to loom over people, and he had a habit of treating Elena like his personal assistant instead of a senior marketing manager. He didn't look at her, he just started talking while he reached for a stirrer. "Hey Elena, for the strategy meeting at 2, I'm going to need you to take the lead on the minutes. Make sure you capture all the action items from the VP. You're the best at organizing that stuff." In the past, Elena would have smiled, felt a pit of resentment in her stomach, and said, "Sure thing, Dave. No problem." She would have spent the meeting scribbling notes while the men in the room discussed the big picture strategy, the very strategy she had actually designed. But today, Anya's voice was in the back of her mind. The frame. The silk over steel. Elena took a slow breath. She didn't turn around quickly or look startled. She finished pouring her cream, then turned to face him. She didn't look angry. She actually gave him a small, pleasant smile. "I'd love to help the team stay organized, Dave," she said, her voice calm and steady. "But my focus needs to be on leading the strategy presentation today. Let's have the intern take the minutes so I can stay fully present for the discussion." Dave froze. He wasn't used to Elena saying anything other than yes. He opened his mouth to argue, to say that the intern wasn't detailed enough, but Elena didn't wait for him to fill the silence. She didn't ask, "Is that okay?" She didn't explain why her time was more valuable. She just gave him a polite nod, picked up her mug, and walked out of the kitchen. As she walked down the hall, she expected to feel guilty. Instead, she felt a strange surge of heat in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. She had drawn her circle in the dirt, and it had held. The science of the energy leak. Why is it so hard to do what Elena did? It's not just in your head, it's in your biology. Women have been socially conditioned for thousands of years to be the peacekeepers. In ancient times, being cast out of the group meant death, so we developed a hypersensitivity to the moods of others. We learned to fawn, a stress response where we try to please someone to avoid conflict. When you fawn, your body leaks energy. You are constantly scanning the room, trying to figure out what everyone needs, so you can provide it before they get upset. This keeps your nervous system in a state of high alert. You can't be magnetic when you are on high alert. Magnetism requires a sense of rested power. Think of your personal energy like a battery. Every time you say yes to something you hate, a little bit of that battery drains. Every time you let a friend vent to you for 2 hours when you are exhausted, more juice disappears. By the time you want to use your energy for your own dreams, your own seduction, or your own career, the battery is dead. The dark feminine understands that no is a complete sentence. She knows that her energy is a sacred resource. She doesn't give it away to anyone who asks, she invests it where it will grow. When you stop the leaks, your vibe changes. People can sense that you aren't available for nonsense. This creates a vacuum of mystery and respect around you. People start to wonder what it takes to get inside your circle. How to build your velvet number. Mastering the boundary is a skill, like playing the piano or lifting weights. You start small and build up. The goal is to reach a state where you can say no without your heart rate even speeding up. The 24-hour rule. One of the biggest ways we leak energy is by responding too fast. We feel the pressure to say yes the moment someone asks. Start practicing the delay. If someone asks for a favor or a commitment, say, "That sounds interesting. Let me check my schedule and get back to you tomorrow." This gives you the space to decide if you actually want to do it, away from the pressure of their presence. The no without the sorry. Watch how many times a day you use the word sorry. Sorry, I can't make it. Sorry, I'm busy. Sorry, but I think. Stop it. You are not sorry for having a life. Replace "I'm sorry" with "unfortunately." Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. It sounds professional, firm, and requires no apology. The body language of the frame. Boundaries start in the body. If you are hunched over, fidgeting with your rings, or tilting your head to the side like a submissive puppy, your words won't matter. Practice standing with your weight evenly on both feet. Keep your chin level. When you say no, look the person in the eye and don't look away first. The person who looks away first is usually the one who feels they have less power. Identify your price of admission. Decide right now what you will no longer tolerate. Maybe it's people calling you after 9 p.m. Maybe it's coworkers asking you to do their busy work. Maybe it's a partner who dismisses your feelings. Write these down. These are your non-negotiables. Once you decide they are non-negotiable, you stop arguing about them. You simply state the boundary and walk away if it's not respected. The seduction of the boundary. There is a common fear that if we set boundaries, people won't like us. We think we have to be sweet and easygoing to be attractive or successful. The truth is the exact opposite. Think about the things in this world that are the most desired. They are the things that are the hardest to get. Gold is valuable because it's rare. A private club is prestigious because there is a gatekeeper. A woman who is too nice and always available is like a park bench. Anybody can sit on it at any time. There is no mystery there. There is no challenge. When you master the velvet no, you become a high-value presence. You are signaling to the world that your time, your body, and your mind are premium territories. Paradoxically, the more you say no to the things that don't serve you, the more people will clamor for your yes. This isn't about playing games. It's about sovereignty. A sovereign queen doesn't ask her subjects if she's allowed to close the palace gates at night. She closes them because it's her palace. When Elena Vance walked out of that kitchen, she didn't just change a meeting schedule. She changed the way Dave looked at her. For the rest of the day, he was more careful with his words. He listened when she spoke. He realized that the good girl he thought he could use was gone, replaced by a woman who knew exactly where her chalk line was drawn. The challenge. It is easy to read about boundaries. It is much harder to set them when your hands are shaking and your good girl brain is screaming that you're being mean. But every time you hold the line, you are reclaiming a piece of your soul that you gave away for free. Look at your life right now. Look at your calendar, your text messages, and your to-do list. Where are you currently acting like a sieve? Who is the person in your life who feels entitled to your energy without ever giving anything back? What is the one yes you've said recently that is sitting in your stomach like a cold stone? The dark feminine isn't asking you to be cruel. She is asking you to be honest. She is asking you to stop lying to yourself and others by pretending to be okay with things that drain you. I want you to find one thing this week, just one, where you can practice the velvet number. It doesn't have to be a big confrontation. It can be as simple as telling a friend you can't talk on the phone tonight because you need rest. No apology. No long story about why you're tired. Just a soft, firm no. When you do it, pay attention to the feeling in your body. You might feel a flash of fear. That's okay. That's just the old conditioning dying. Stay in your circle. Feel the silk over steel of your own frame. Ask yourself, if I stopped asking for permission to protect my own peace, who would I become by tomorrow morning? Chapter 5, 3 Pillars of Magnetic Presence. The air inside the Schloss Schwarzenau castle was so still it felt heavy. In 1937, this grand Austrian estate was a place of gold, silk, and absolute silence. For Hedy Lamarr, it was also a prison. Her husband, Friedrich Mandel, was one of the richest men in the world. He was an arms dealer who sold weapons to some of the most dangerous people in history. He was also a man who treated his beautiful young wife like a painting on the wall, something to be looked at, owned, and kept under lock and key. Hedy spent her days surrounded by luxury, but she was never alone. Mandel's guards followed her. His servants reported her every move. At night, she sat at long dinner tables where powerful men discussed the coming war. She was expected to sit still, look perfect, and say nothing. She was the ultimate good girl on a global stage, playing the role of the devoted wife while her soul was screaming for air. The silence in the castle wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that happens right before a storm breaks. Hedy knew she couldn't just run. If she looked scared, if she looked like she was hiding something, she would be caught. To escape a man who owned the police and the border guards, she couldn't act like a victim. She had to act like she belonged exactly where she was, even as she walked toward the exit. Magnetism is often misunderstood as being loud or flashy. We think the most magnetic person is the one talking the most or wearing the brightest colors. But true, dark feminine magnetism is exactly what Hetty used to walk out of that castle and into history. It is a weight. It is the ability to hold your own space so completely that other people's eyes are drawn to you, not because you are asking for attention, but because you are so home in your own skin that they can't help but notice. The night the walls dissolved, Hetty's plan for escape was as brilliant as it was daring. She didn't try to climb a fence or crawl through a tunnel. She knew that to get past the people watching her, she had to use their own expectations against them. She found a maid who looked remarkably like her. Over many weeks, Hetty practiced a quiet, calm presence. She didn't show fear. She didn't show anger toward her husband. She became a shadow, present but impossible to grab. On the night she chose to leave, the castle was hosting a large party. The halls were filled with the sound of music and the smell of expensive cigars. Hetty invited her maid to her room. She had already prepared a drink for the girl, laced with a sleeping pill. As the maid drifted off, Hetty didn't panic. She didn't rush. She moved with a slow, steady grace that she had practiced in the mirror for days. She dressed in the maid's simple clothes. She took her most expensive jewelry, diamonds and emeralds that could fund a new life, and sewed them into the lining of her coat. Then she did the hardest thing of all. She walked out of her bedroom door and through the halls of the castle. She passed guards who knew her face. She passed servants she saw every day. But because she moved with the unbothered energy of someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be, no one stopped her. She wasn't scurrying. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She walked with the weight of a woman who owned her own body. She took a bicycle and rode through the dark Austrian woods to the train station. By the time Mandel realized his trophy was gone, Hetty was on her way to London, and eventually to becoming the biggest star in Hollywood. This story shows us the first pillar of magnetic presence, somatic sovereignty. This is a big phrase for a simple idea. It means being the absolute ruler of your own physical body. When Hetty walked through those halls, she wasn't thinking about what the guards thought of her. She wasn't trying to please them or avoid them. She was completely at home in her own skin. Most of us spend our lives living in our heads. We are constantly thinking about how we look, if our hair is right, or if we said the wrong thing. This creates a leaky energy. People can feel that you aren't fully there. When you are leaky, you aren't magnetic. You are a ghost in your own life. To be magnetic, you must bring all your energy back into your physical frame. You must occupy your body from your toes to the top of your head. Elena and the Art of Being Seen. In a small, dimly lit lounge in Seattle, Elena Vance sat alone at a corner table. The rain was drumming against the window, a sound she usually found depressing, but tonight it felt like music. For years, Elena had been the woman who disappeared into the furniture. At work, she was the one who did the most labor but received the least credit. In her old relationship, she was the one who changed her hobbies and her schedule to fit her boyfriend's life. Tonight was different. Elena wasn't there to meet anyone. She wasn't there to be nice. She was there to practice the second pillar, the gaze. In previous weeks, Elena had started her shadow work. She had looked into her obsidian mirror and seen the parts of herself she used to hide, her ambition, her quiet rage, and her deep desire to be respected. She had started using the velvet number at work, setting boundaries that made her boss look at her with a new kind of curiosity. But tonight, she wanted to see if she could hold her own space in a room full of strangers. She felt the old urge to pull out her phone. The phone is the good girl's shield. It gives you something to do, so you don't have to look at people. It makes you feel busy so you don't feel awkward. But Elena kept her phone in her bag. She sat with her back straight but not stiff. She took deep breaths, feeling the air fill her stomach, anchoring her to the chair. A man walked across the room. In the past, Elena would have looked down at her lap or quickly looked away if their eyes met. She would have felt like she was bothering him just by existing. But tonight, as he glanced her way, Elena didn't look away. She held his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him with a calm, steady focus. It wasn't a challenge, it was an acknowledgement. I see you, and I am here. Then she slowly turned her gaze back to her drink. She felt a jolt of electricity run down her spine. It was a tiny moment, but it felt like a revolution. For the first time in 34 years, she didn't feel like a person who was waiting for permission to be in the room. She felt like the room belonged to her. A few minutes later, the man approached her. He didn't use a cheesy line. He looked a little nervous, which was strange because he was handsome and well-dressed. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, but you have a very interesting energy. I felt like I had to come say hello. Elena smiled, but it was a slow, seductive smile, one that stayed in her eyes. Hello, she said softly. She didn't rush to fill the silence. She let the silence sit between them like a velvet curtain. She realized that magnetism wasn't something she had to do. It was something that happened when she stopped trying so hard to be invisible. Pillar 1. Somatic Sovereignty. The first pillar of magnetic presence is about how you inhabit your body. Most people move through the world as if they are apologizing for taking up space. They hunch their shoulders, they walk fast, and they make themselves small. This is the good girl conditioning at work. It tells you that to be safe, you must be small. Dark feminine energy is the opposite. It is heavy energy. Think of a queen walking into a room or a lioness moving through the grass. They don't rush. They move with a sense of weight. You can practice this right now by checking your posture. Are you leaning forward, as if you are trying to get to the next moment? Or are you leaning back into yourself? Somatic sovereignty is the feeling of being back in your own seat. When you speak to someone, try to feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body in your chair. When you are grounded in your physical self, your voice becomes deeper and more resonant. Your movements become smoother. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Hedy Lamarr was a beautiful woman, but her beauty wasn't what got her out of the castle. It was her presence. She occupied her body so completely that she became a solid object that couldn't be pushed around. When you have somatic sovereignty, people naturally step back to give you room. They listen more closely because they can feel the weight behind your words. Pillar 2. The power of the gaze. The second pillar is how you use your eyes. Our eyes are the primary way we communicate power and interest. Most of us use flickering eye contact. We look, we get nervous, and we look away. This signals to the other person's brain that we are submissive or uncomfortable. Dark feminine magnetism uses the eyes as a tool of enchantment. It involves what is often called soft focus. Instead of staring intensely at someone, which can feel aggressive, you relax the muscles around your eyes. You look at the person as if you are seeing their whole self, not just their face. The 3-second rule that Elena used is a powerful way to build this skill. When you make eye contact with someone, hold it for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. During those 3 seconds, don't feel the need to smile or perform. Just be there. Then look away slowly. This creates a vacuum. It makes the other person wonder what you were thinking. It draws them toward you. This works because it breaks the social contract of being nice. A nice person looks away quickly because they don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. A sovereign woman holds the gaze because she is comfortable with her own intensity. She isn't afraid to be seen, and she isn't afraid to look. Pillar 3. Unbothered energy. The third pillar is the most internal, but it is the one people feel the most. It is the energy of being unbothered. Think back to Hedy Lamarr walking past the guards. If she had been bothered by the risk, her heart would have been racing, her hands would have been shaking, and the guards would have smelled her fear. Instead, she adopted the energy of someone who was simply going about her business. Unbothered energy means that your internal state is not determined by what is happening outside of you. If someone is rude to you, you don't get defensive, you stay calm. If someone tries to rush you, you move at your own